Hey everyone, welcome to another video on C Sharp. I hope you are finding this playlist useful. In this video, we'll talk about the jump statements with C Sharp. In C Sharp, if you want your code to be executed or switch from one condition to another condition, one method to another method, or even to exit out of the iteration or exit out of a method, then you use the jump statement. There are various types of jump statement available, which we'll look at with the example in this demonstration. So we have four types of jump statement as you might have seen in the title. Let's look at the example. So here is the return keyword example. I have written a method with that. So here in this method, I have an array of element and a for each loop is iterating those array element, and I have a condition. If the array element value is 3, then it should return, and if it is not 3, it should print basically. Then again I have a return here out of the for each loop. It is a return inside the method, and then we have a console write line. Now if you look at this console versus this console, this last one is grayed out by the compiler. The reason for that is compiler straight away knows that this return is in all the time it is going to be executed irrespective of the condition or not, which means that as soon as this line of code is going to be executed, there is no possibility of this line to be executed ever. So which means that this is a dead code. This is never going to be executed, and that is the reason compiler is suggesting you as a developer that you should do something about this line of code, because this is a dead code you have written, because this is never going to be executed because you have a return before this line code. So that's about one warning. Now why don't we have the warning here in this case? Why it is not warned out by this return? Because we have the return here, and we know that if I have element like this, the condition is anyways going to meet. So in the case of conditional return, compiler never makes a judgment about the element on which the condition is going to make, because here you can see that straight away the value is basically 3, and we know that the value will meet the condition. But let's say if this value is going to be returned from your service call, let's say you have a third party service which you are making call to, and then service returns an array element, and then you iterate the result. So in that case your compiler will not know what are the return or service output is going to be, and whether this output will meet this condition or not. So in a short, compiler will not look into the individual elements within the array, so hence it will not know whether this condition will be meeting or not, and the return will be executed or not. That's the reason it is not grayed out. But as soon as the condition is going to be meet, this will return, and this will straight away jump to here, or maybe I should say here, which is the end of this particular method, and it will go outside the method execution, which means that this line will not be executed after executing this code and this as well. Neither of this. As soon as it execute this, it will straight away go to here. Let's look at the example of debugging this code. So I have 4 numbers. Number 1 not meeting the condition, so it's going to print the value. Number 2 not meeting the condition, so it's going to print the value again. As we expected, it has printed the value 2. Next I have condition value 3, which means it is meeting the condition, so it will go inside the return statement. As you can see that as soon as the return executed, this line has not been executed, this line has not been executed, and of course this is not going to be executed either. And compiler goes straight out of this method and it goes to the caller, which it is calling the method, which means that we just have got number 1 and number 2 printed out, which is we do not have any print value for this, which is for item 3, which is this line is not printed, and also the remaining number of item which is there in the iteration is also not executed by the for each loop, because it's and also the remaining number of item is not been printed by or executed by the for each loop, which is number 4, or any other item which will be listed, because as soon as it has made the condition, it's exited out of the condition, right? Now it may possible that you can return any value as well. It's not like you have to return empty. You use the return keyword with empty semicolons. But if your function is returning any object, your any literal type of value like boolean, number, or anything like that, you can also return this number using the return keyword. Give you one example of return with this. Here in this case, we have a function which is returning a boolean type, and we have a if condition. If let's say 5 is greater than less than 7, then you would print this particular value and then return true, otherwise you return this, right? So that's another example of return keywords. But in a summary, whenever we use return, it exit out of the entire function or the boundary in which the code is being executed. It's not about this for each loop itself, but it's exit right out of the method. Now if we compare this for with return keyword with the break statement, so which is our next iteration type, we have an example here. So what is the break statement tells us is basically you use the break statement when you break out of any condition. For example, you have the switch case, right? And in between the cases you write the break statement to exit out of the cases. Let's say if my day of the week is meeting one of the cases, which in this case, let's say if it is meeting Tuesday, this will execute this console line, and once that is been executed, it will execute the break statement. And break statement, what it does, it will move the cursor out of this switch case and it will execute the line which is there out of the switch case, right? Let me show you one example. Let's run that. So that's the day of the week we are getting as Friday. It will go to the switch case. It comes here as the Friday is matching. It will print the console line, and as soon as the break exits, it's move out of the switch case, which means this conditional block, and we have the console line. Whereas in the case of return, it was going right after the end of your method execution, which is not the case here with the break. So that's the difference. Another example of the break, same iteration example. We are iterating the number of elements, and it's going to be print the number of elements. As you can see here, 2 elements are printed here. Now at the third element, the break condition is meeting, so we are executing the break element, which means that it is going to be out of the for loop, and it will execute the console.write line, which is written outside the iteration logic, which is the for each loop. That's the difference of return and break. Now let's look at our continue operator. Now continue basically use, like I mentioned, inside the iteration logic, and if you want to tell your compiler that you should continue executing the next element, you should not go down to the line of code which is written below the continue. So I'll show you what I mean by this is I'm going to have the same number of element running on the for each loop statement, not meeting the condition because the item value is 1, so it will print the value. Item value 2, not meeting the condition, it will print the value. And here in this case, item value is 3, it will go to the continue operation, our continue keyword. Here now if you see, if I press F11, what will happen is it's going to the next element. It's not gone outside the for loop, which was the case with the return, which was the case with the break statement. It is not going outside the method, which was the case with the return statement or return keyword, but instead it is going to the next iterative element within the for loop, which means that it's going to print the value 4 in this case. Show you an example. We have a printing value 1, value 2, and value 4. Because at the value 3 it has met the condition, so this line was not executed. So as soon as the continue statement is executed, it has went to the next statement, which means that you don't want to do with element 3 or with this index element, you should jump to the next element. So that's the difference between break, continue and return. Now let's go to our next example, which is using a goto keyword. Now with the goto keyword, again you use the goto keyword, like I said, if you want to jump to a specific label. So how do you define the label? Is you define the label as in colon, like you write the switch cases. So you don't use the keyword case here, you don't use the keyword case here, but any just label you define it. Let's say label some statement, then colon, and then whatever logic you want to write it inside this label, you write it like this. And then as soon as your goto statement uses that particular label, the code straight away jump to that label. I'll show you how. So again we are running a for loop starting from 1 to 10, and for each it's basically checking the condition inside the if block, and unless the if block is going to meet the condition, it will keep on printing the values. As you can see that from right from the beginning it has printed the value 1 to 4, and then as soon as it is meeting the condition, which is exit label, if I press F11 now, it's not going to execute this line either, right? So what is happening now? We are basically straight away jumping to the exit label, and now it's going to print or execute the code which is written inside the label logic, which is the labeled statement in this case, right? So if you want to jump your code like this, you use the goto keyword. So this is for the different type of jump statement example, and the differences between these, when to use what type of statement. You should know the difference and use this special keyword depending upon the need wisely. I hope you have found this useful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment box. I'll try to give you an answer. Till then, keep watching the rest of the videos. I'll have some more interesting videos in the same playlist. Thanks for watching it. See you in the next video.